I grew up pretty solidly middle class, and my husband Jay, 48, grew up working poor. My father spent 20 years in the military, then 30 years with the Union, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. Neither attended college. It was very important to my parents that both my brother and I attended college. My brother Mark, 48, ended up attending a service academy, so no tuition. I ended up with enough scholarship money to make my own full ride at a private university. Our parents gifted us the money they would have put towards our tuition upon our respective graduations. My husband worked his butt off to get through undergrad, grad, and an MBA, all while working full-time and sometimes supporting family members. He and I are coming up on our 18th wedding anniversary this summer. He is an executive, and I worked at a nonprofit for 5 years before becoming a stay-at-home mom. My life revolves around our 4 children, though I still find plenty of time for volunteer work. We are incredibly lucky, live a very charmed life, and we don't take it for granted, at least I hope. My husband has a large family. His mother, 66, Dee, one younger brother, Tim, 46, and sister Lee, 45, live in the same area we do, and we see them the most frequently of his relatives. My parents and my brother and his family live near us as well. We are all very close and spend a lot of time together, including vacations. My parents are retired. My brother spent 20 in the military and then went into a second well-paying career. His wife Jess, 45, also retired military, is a hospital administrator. Lee and her wife Amy, 39, own a very successful salon day spa. Tim is a deputy sheriff. He is also a widower who remarried Emily, 44, 4 years ago, and navigating her feelings is what I need help with. Emily came into our lives suddenly. It had been about 10 months since Tim's wife had passed away. She showed up at Lee's salon and said Tim sent her to get dolled up. A couple weeks after that, Tim started bringing her to family events. I felt bad for Emily. No one liked her, and it was palpable. 5 weeks later, she announced she was pregnant at Tim's daughter's first communion in front of his deceased wife's parents. She told everyone she was on the pill and it must have failed. No one really believed her. Tim married her 2 weeks later in Las Vegas. When they opened our gift, Tim flipped out with happiness and her face fell. She looked incredulous and said she thought we would get them a house. We had given them a trip to Hawaii for their honeymoon. Since Vegas was going to serve as their honeymoon too, we thought this would be a nice treat. We would be caring for our nieces and even offered to take Emily's children or hire childcare. My husband said, rather calmly, to his credit, that the trip could be used towards a down payment instead. She clicked her tongue and said, "What a nice gift, a mortgage and no honeymoon. Welcome to the family." She was positively glaring at me. Before anyone could say anything else, my husband took my hand and we left. Later, when they got back from Hawaii, she apologized, saying that since we had bought townhomes for both our parents, she assumed we'd gift them a house too. For our children, and so they can all be near the family in a nice, safe, gated community. She has 5 children and Tim has 3, and then they have 1 together. It's been a passive-aggressive spiral since then, and she seems to target me the most. Look, we have money. I have expensive bags and shoes and all those totally unnecessary but fantastic things wealthy housewives can collect. Every time it's, "Oh, Chanel bag, must be nice, but I'd rather my children have nice clothes." Or she'll put her foot up next to my foot and say, $8,000 or $19.95. I can't tell the difference. Can any of you? And she'll laugh and laugh like it's an inside joke. By the way, I do not own $8,000 shoes. The other women in my family have the same or similar priced things. Mine seem to anger Emily the most. Hosting holidays and celebrations rotates between myself, Jess, and Lee. Thanksgiving is my holiday. For the past 4 years, she has done something to mess it up. Year 1, she accidentally broke a crystal punch bowl that had been a gift to my great-grandmother on her wedding day. I was devastated, but was a gracious hostess and actually believed it was an accident. Later, my cousin said the only way it could have broke the way it had was for someone to pick it up and drop it straight down. It was full of red drink and made a mess, ruining some linens too. Year 2, our powder room overflowed. She admitted she had done that as a fun family prank that had gone wrong. We always prank each other. We do not. Year 3, my gravy was so salty it was inedible. I'm blaming it on her. She kept asking, "Oh, where is your giblet gravy? I just love your gravy, and on and on. This past year was the worst. Amy pulled me aside and showed me a bottle of Ipecac. She said she saw Emily pull it out of her purse, then pop it in real quick again when Amy walked away. Amy took it after Emily walked out. I was so panicked she might have used it already, but it was sealed. Amy and I decided not to say anything right then. Later, Emily came out from where the coats and purses were, looking flush, and she kept looking at Amy and looking away. I told my husband later that night, and he was furious and called his brother. They had a terrible fight and have barely spoken since. I know this is so long, but there is one more thing that happened that really put this over the top. My brother and Jess host a Super Bowl Sunday party. They go all out. My brother not only invites our family, his friends, and co-workers, but also work friends of just about anyone in our family. Emily decided she wanted to host Super Bowl. She sent out invites to everyone in the family. Everyone said they would be attending Jess and Mark's party. She sent out reminders stating that it was time for someone else to be allowed to host an event and that this year was their year to host Super Bowl. This was the fair thing to do, and she expected everyone there with a snack at 3 p.m. BYOB. Needless to say, no one showed. About an hour into the game, Tim even showed up at my brother's to watch the game. I kept expecting angry calls and texts, yet heard nothing. The following Friday, it all blew up. My children attend parochial school, and I am a room mom, so I attend Mass on Fridays with them. While this is technically a public weekday Mass, it's a church attached to a school, so all of the children are there. I was standing in the side aisle helping my class when she walks up, grabs my arm, and says, "We need to talk." Everyone turned their heads as she didn't bother to keep her voice down. Luckily, we were near a side door and we go outside before she blew up. She started screaming at me about how I ruined her life, how my jealousy of her kept her from becoming a part of the family, how I was just a pretty mean girl that never left my sorority, but sooner or later my ass would fall and my face would rot. How she was sorry that her hot dogs and chips weren't good enough for me, and I just couldn't miss out on my Super Bowl porterhouse. It was then that one of our deacons walked out, and I wished I could have evaporated. How ridiculous. He told us they could hear us inside. I started to apologize. She screamed, "I don't ducking care, P." I told her I was done and not to come to my children's school ever again. Our deacon was already pulling out his cell phone. He said to her to leave or he'd call the police. She yelled at him her husband was the police, but she guessed he only cared about women who married walking wallets like I did. He started to laugh. I don't blame him. It was so absurd. I tried not to, but I giggled too. I looked at her shaking my head and said, "Emily." She slapped me across the face, spit at me, and walked away. I've never been so shocked. I've never been hit in my life. She left a bruise on my arm where she held onto it. She also keyed my car all up. Everyone wanted to call the police, but I asked them not to please let us handle this family situation. I was so embarrassed. My husband is furious. His brother came over and apologized to us both profusely. He said he would pay for my car. I wouldn't hear of it, though my husband looked tempted. The whole family knows and has taken my side, which I think makes it worse. However, I am grateful for the sentiment. The whole parish knows. It was comforting Sunday to hear story after story of crazy in-laws, but I want to fix this. How? How do I fix this with her? Day started with a family meeting at my husband's office. His mom, brother, sister, and my brother, Tim. Honestly, he was relieved. He said he'd been ready to divorce her since the Thanksgiving incident, but he said he was so embarrassed for what he had gotten himself and his 3 girls into. His girls are 7, 9, and 12. My husband and his brother and my brother were on one end of the spectrum, wanted full prosecution, etc. Amy and I were the other. Let's just cut her out. Everyone else was in between. Finally decided we would file a police report, get restraining orders, get a few more cameras for home. Tim would file for divorce and custody of their shared daughter, Diane. They would stay with us for a while. Then the plan was for all of them to move to a new home with Tim's mom. We all split up. My husband and I went to our attorney, then to our church, with plans to go to the police station after. When the administrator at our diocese found out vandalism had taken place on church property and authorities had not been called, he was furious. So the authorities were called. Long story a bit shorter. Report filed. Temporary protective orders. Long day, all good. Not so fast. Tim had gone home to get the girls' things and to arrange a personal leave. Emily was there. She knew something was up, and I guess it was pretty ugly. She said a lot of horrible things about Beth and Beth's children, apparently. Broke a lot of things and took off after saying he could have his divorce and get this, his whole crazy family. Seriously, I could laugh over this if it wasn't so heartbreaking. Tim went to pull the girls from school. When he got back, his German Shepherd was gone. My brother's wife had my children for the afternoon. My husband, brother, and I are just leaving our attorney for the second time, and we get a call from our community security that there has been some vandalization. My heart sank. We get home. My bare root roses are torn up, and there is feces smeared all over our front door. I didn't go into what was keyed into my car, but she had keyed C, Ducker U. Yes, Ducker U, B, and wetback into it, and what looked like a P. Now, I'm of Cuban heritage, so the word she was looking for was bolsero, but it was a close enough insult. She wrote C, B, and J ducked me in her feces on my porch. I will say it was at this point I stopped worrying about her feelings. Police were called. My brother Mark called 2 of his out-of-work vet buddies who are now employed as our security for the foreseeable future. Now we find out from Tim that Jax, the doggy, is missing. Emily calls him and says she will K herself and Jax if he doesn't bring Diane to her. Tim went to meet her with the police. Jax has broken ribs and a broken leg, but he also bit her up pretty badly. Apparently, she just started sobbing when they took her into custody. So we all ended up at Lee and Amy's house, and this is so heartbreaking. Karen, Tim's 12-year-old, broke down and said she was so happy Emily was gone. She admitted that Emily would S her and her sisters and say mean things about their fat, frumpy mother, and they should be grateful God gave them such a cool, pretty stepmom. After all the children got to bed, Amy told us all she was a target of Emily too. That's why she was suspicious of her. Emily was incredulous that Amy could be a lesbian and look so feminine. So she would always point out men and make crude statements and even make dating profiles for her and try to set her up on dates. She once held her against the wall and kissed her, and when Amy pushed her away, she said, "See, I knew you weren't a D." As for Emily's children, they are 16, 15, second husband, 11, 9, boyfriend, 7, fourth husband. 16, 15, and 7 are with their fathers. 11 and 9 are with child welfare. Tim wants to get custody of them. Their father has not been in the picture for a very long time. There is a lot more detail, but I'm just mentally and emotionally exhausted. We are taking all the children away for the weekend. Therapy for everyone. I'm just hoping we can get this all resolved as smoothly as possible. This is hands down the most insane, most honestly asinine thing I have ever gone through, and it's still ongoing. In high school, I started dating Chang, an aspiring pre-med student from a wealthy family. I never had any interest in medicine, so my mother was thrilled at the prospect of potentially having a doctor as a son-in-law. My mother is hilarious and fun, but we never had a good relationship, so I was glad that she was nice to me for once. I didn't realize I would severely regret ever dating Chang. Chang would constantly put me down. At my birthday party, he loudly said, "Your sister's boobs look even bigger when she stands next to you." He even criticized the very genuine eulogy I gave at my best friend's funeral, saying, "Your transitions were messy and your conclusion was weak." He told me I would never make it on my own and that I wasn't good enough for him, so I was lucky he was willing to support me when he became a doctor. In the meantime, he made me drive him 55 miles to his school and back and refused to get his driver's license. I paid 50% of all meals, including birthdays and anniversaries, even though he had a hefty allowance while I worked 2 minimum wage jobs. Not to mention, he would eat well over half the food. Chang was also very emotionally unstable. He would frequently pick fights and yell at me, purposely deepening his voice into a low bellow. Then he would make himself into the victim. There were times he tried running away at 2 in the morning and I would have to pull him back. During these arguments, he would just wail and sob while I tried my best to say the right things to placate him. Once, after an argument, he pretended he needed to use the bathroom, but instead left the light and fan on so I wouldn't notice him running away. I had to drive around searching for him, and when I picked him up a few neighborhoods away, all he said was, "Sorry." One night at the club, I was dancing when Chang suddenly stormed off. He said, "You disgust me. Some guys were watching you dance and you looked like you enjoyed giving them a show." I was confused because I was dancing rave style with glow sticks, not even grinding or twerking, and I hadn't noticed any guys looking at me. "You're such a S," he said. I started to cry and we left the club. I got into the car, sobbing into my hands. When I finally looked up, he wasn't even in the car. He had just opened and closed the door, making it sound like he got in, and abandoned me again. When I tried calling him, his phone rang from the seat of his chair. He left it open to a texting app which only read, "I'm going to K myself now. Tell everyone I'm sorry." He had taken the car keys, so I sat in the parking lot for an hour, scared and alone. He finally returned crying and said, "Sorry I couldn't do it." Sometimes after arguments, he would call my mother to tell her his side of the story. Before I knew it, she was screaming at me about very personal details of our relationship. Shortly after my best friend, CS, Chang broke up with me after an argument. He immediately called my mother and lied to her, telling her I had broken up with him and threatened to CS like my best friend had. My mother sternly told me I'd better get back with him or else I'll really regret it. My mother tried to force us back together. She would allow him inside the house and even opened my bedroom door to let him in. She even got angry because I wouldn't let him sleep in my bed with me. Chang continued to come over every week and told my mother he was tutoring me, when he was actually just trying to convince me to get back together with him. He even bragged that my mom was stupid and easy to manipulate. He blackmailed me and threatened to tell everyone my secrets. I was completely, hopelessly trapped. I finally got rid of him for good after 2 years of that nightmare. It wasn't over though. My mother made it her mission to make my life a living hell for leaving him. Suddenly, all my privileges were revoked, and I was being punished for breaking rules she seemingly made up on the spot. If she found out I was going on a date with someone new, she tried barring me from leaving the house. If I was even studying with another guy, she would completely lose it. I told her Chang had manipulated me, and she said, "What makes you think you deserve any better? You're stupid and worthless. You were lucky Chang even looked at you." Once she slammed my door open, scanned my room with hatred in her eyes, and said, "Your room is filthy, you B," before storming off. How would she have known the state of my room before barging in? She even made up a fake elaborate story that he found a new girlfriend who was way better than me, and I must really regret it now. I realized she probably just likes Chang more than me. She hugged and comforted him when he cried, but mocked me when I cried, saying, "Here come the waterworks." She's saying we need to have compassion for him because he's suffering from a broken heart. Yet when I got dumped by another ex in high school, she said, "I don't blame him for dumping you. You're really ducked up." After I left Chang, she told me he was like a son to her and it was like losing a child. Today, at the advice of a psychiatrist, I took out literally thousands in loans to move out 3 years ago because I was becoming depressed. Initially, I expressed my concern about the finances, and my psychiatrist said, "What's the point if you might not even be alive tomorrow?" Now, I am about to graduate with a degree in engineering from a great university, and I am dating a wonderful guy. My mom constantly begs me to move back home, but I can't risk my mental health again. It has been 4 years since I have spoken to Chang. I heard he got rejected from med school and never got another girlfriend. He calls me late at night about 3 times a year, which I just ignore. I deleted him on Facebook long ago, but he would like things I wrote on mutual friends walls, so I blocked him. The problem is that my mom is still obsessed with him today. She used to ask me how I'd feel if he got married, how I'd feel if he was gone. She used to say I would regret leaving him once he's a successful doctor. Now that he's been rejected from med school, she changed her tune and says despite his flaws, he was obviously in love with me and I owe him for that. My mother and I are in a constant cycle of her defending Chang, us not speaking for a month, and her inviting me out and pretending nothing happened. It has been this way for the past 3 years since I moved out. The last time I saw my mother, I was visiting with my boyfriend, whom she likes. She asked me to move back home again, and somehow Chang came up in conversation. She defended him, telling my boyfriend how sweet Chang was. I was completely mortified. Not only that, but she began to trash me, saying that I was a bad daughter and how difficult it was living with me. Then why is she begging me to move back home? After we left, I demanded an apology from her via text. I told her she should not have defended Chang and tried to make me look bad in front of my boyfriend. I made it very clear that by supporting Chang, she was supporting his A of me. Her response consisted of, "You're the one who decided to date him, not me." Expecting me to stop talking about Chang is like expecting you to stop talking about your divorced father. That's just unreasonable. Your new boyfriend needs to understand you have a past. You broke Chang's heart and hurt him, so you owe him your sympathy and your kindness. Just because you hate Chang doesn't mean I have to. Despite his mistakes, Chang did some very nice things for you, like tutoring you. Wow, he really knew what he was doing with that one. I did not back down this time though and stayed firm, asking for an apology until she stopped responding. I have heard from other family members that she is still upset about the argument. When she doesn't talk about Chang, we get along really well. We have similar political beliefs and gossip about her friends while shopping and going out for dinner and desserts. This all goes to crap when she brings up Chang. It's been 4 years, and despite all his A, I think I could have moved on if my mother hadn't continued bringing him up. Now I have to relive the nightmare and experience it again in my head, along with all the rage and regret.